My name is Ryan, and I'm 33 years old. I still remember the sound of the lock turning on my 18th birthday, like someone had closed not just a door, but an entire chapter of my life. My parents stood inside the house with their arms crossed, while I stood outside, holding nothing but a duffel bag and a set of car keys. My mom said flatly, "You're an adult now. You're on your own." My dad added, almost like it was a joke, "Consider it a life lesson." Then the door closed. The lights flicked off. I was left staring at my reflection in the darkened window of the house I'd grown up in, the house that was no longer mine. At first, I tried to laugh it off, convincing myself it was some kind of test, that maybe they were bluffing. But when I came back the next morning, knocking with a mix of hope and anger, no one answered. The locks had been changed. The garage code no longer worked. My phone buzzed with a single text from my mother. "We told you good luck." That was it. No explanation. No guidance. No safety net. I spent the next month sleeping in the back seat of my old sedan. It rattled whenever I turned the key, but it was the only shelter I had. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, staring through the smudged windshield at the sky, replaying every conversation I'd had with my parents, trying to see where I had missed a sign, some clue that they'd planned this. But the truth was, they had always been cold, quick to remind me that I wasn't the golden child. That was my sister Emily, the one who followed every rule, got straight A's, and never questioned them. Meanwhile, I was the kid who liked to draw, who skipped football practice, who dreamed of moving to the city to do something different. In their eyes, I was a disappointment waiting to happen. On my 18th birthday, they decided to cut their losses. During those car-sleeping months, I cycled through every emotion. At first, it was anger, raw and searing, making me want to storm back into the house and scream at them. But that anger eventually turned to despair. I'd sit in the driver's seat with the keys dangling in my hands, feeling the weight of their words pressing down. "You're on your own now." It wasn't just a sentence. It was a life sentence. Yet, in that darkness, I found a spark of determination. If they thought I couldn't make it, then I had no choice but to prove them wrong. My first job was at a gas station working the overnight shift. It wasn't glamorous. I stocked shelves, cleaned bathrooms, and swept floors at 3 a.m. while the world slept. I showered in the grimy employee bathroom and bought dollar burgers from a drive-thru. Every night, I told myself it was temporary, that if I kept moving forward, things would change. Slowly, that spark of determination became something stronger. I started saving money until I could rent a tiny studio apartment. It wasn't much bigger than my car, but it had 4 walls, a bed, and a door I could lock from the inside. For the first time, I didn't feel like the world could push me out. But the distance between me and my parents became more than physical. It turned emotional too. I stopped calling, stopped checking if they'd softened. I told myself they didn't exist, that family was something I'd have to build from scratch. I worked harder than I thought I could. First at the gas station, then at a diner, then at a construction company where I learned the ropes and proved myself. With every paycheck and every small step forward, I could almost hear my parents' voices in the back of my mind, doubting me. And every time, I used that memory as fuel. Now at 33, I look around at the life I've built, the home I own, the business I started, the friends who feel more like family than my blood ever did, and I feel both pride and disbelief. I survived what should have broken me. But life has a strange sense of humor. Just when I thought I had left the past behind, my parents showed up at my door. It was a Tuesday evening when I heard the knock, a steady, almost hesitant knock that didn't sound like the delivery drivers or neighbors I was used to. When I opened the door, there they were. My father looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched and his face lined with worry. My mother clutched her purse like it was the only thing anchoring her. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. But then my mother spoke, her voice trembling. "Ryan," she said, "we need your help." Old wounds I thought had healed started to ache again. I stood frozen in the doorway, the same doorway where I had greeted clients and friends countless times. But this was different. My father's eyes flicked around the room, avoiding mine, taking in the hardwood floors and the art on the walls. My mother, however, looked straight at me with the same sharp eyes I remembered, the same ones that had compared me to my sister. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then she sighed, half pleading, half expectant. "Ryan, can we come in?" she asked. I hesitated. Every instinct in me screamed no. I thought of all those nights in my car, shivering under a thin blanket while they slept soundly behind warm walls. Still, something inside me, maybe politeness, maybe curiosity, shifted. "Fine," I said, stepping aside. They entered like strangers, glancing at a life they hadn't built, a life they had bet against. My dad cleared his throat. "You've done well for yourself," he muttered, sounding more like an accusation than a compliment. My mother nodded, but her lips tightened. It wasn't pride, it was calculation. We sat down in the living room, and I waited. Finally, my mother broke the silence. "It's Emily," she said. "She's going through a difficult time." The name, my sister, the golden child, hung in the air. "She's had some setbacks," my mother continued. "Her husband left. She's struggling financially. She's not doing well emotionally either. We thought, since you've done so well, maybe you could help her get back on her feet." I stared at them, trying to process the audacity. 15 years of silence. 15 years of pretending I didn't exist, and now they were here. Not to apologize or reconnect, but to ask me to bail out the daughter they had always chosen over me. "What exactly are you asking?" I said slowly. My father finally spoke, his tone firm, like this was already decided. "We were hoping you could lend her some money, a substantial amount, enough to keep her house. Maybe start over. She's your sister after all." I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "You locked me out on my 18th birthday, told me I was on my own, and now you want me to save Emily?" My mother frowned, as if I were being unreasonable. "That was years ago. We wanted you to learn responsibility. And look, it worked. You're successful now, aren't you? We gave you the push you needed." Her words hit me like ice water. She was rewriting history right in front of me. In her version, abandoning me wasn't cruelty. It was some kind of twisted gift. I leaned forward, my hands gripping my knees. "You didn't give me a push. You left me with nothing. I slept in my car. I scrubbed gas station floors at 3 in the morning. I built this life without you." My dad waved a hand dismissively. "The past is the past. Emily needs you now. We always knew you were stronger, that you could handle yourself. That's why we focused more on her. She was fragile. You were resilient." The old anger rose again, the same anger that had kept me awake so many nights in that car. Resilient. That was their excuse. That I could handle being thrown away while Emily got all the care and comfort. "And what about me?" I asked quietly. "Who was there for me when I needed help?" My mother's eyes flickered, but she didn't answer. Instead, she said, "Ryan, don't be selfish. She's your family. She needs you." The word selfish stung. Selfish, after all I had endured, after all I had clawed my way through. Selfish, because I wasn't eager to hand over the stability I had bled for. I thought back to birthdays spent alone, holidays without a call, countless reminders that I was expendable. And now, after all that, they dared to sit in my living room and make me feel guilty for not opening my wallet. They weren't here for me. They weren't even here because they wanted to see me. They were here because Emily had fallen and they needed someone to lift her back up. As my mother's voice grew sharper and my father's eyes more insistent, I realized something else. This wasn't just about money. This was about control, re-establishing the same dynamic as before. Me, the one who gives, who sacrifices. Emily, the one who receives. The roles hadn't changed, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to play along. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees, lowering his voice like he was about to share something confidential. "Ryan," he said, "this isn't just about helping your sister. It's about doing what's right for the family. You've done well, and it's only fair you share some of that with the people who raised you." I almost laughed at the word raised. Raised implied care, guidance, support. What they had done was closer to abandonment wrapped in self-righteousness. Before I could respond, my mother reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of papers. She slid them across the coffee table. "What's this?" I asked, though my chest was already tightening. "It's a loan agreement," she said smoothly. "We thought it would be easier for you to help Emily this way. We've already spoken to the bank. ... Technically, we used your name since you have better credit now. The loan's been approved. All you have to do is sign." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I picked up the papers and scanned the lines. Sure enough, my name was printed neatly at the top. The bank, the terms, the repayment schedule, everything had been set up without my knowledge. My parents hadn't just come to ask for help. They had already decided to entangle me in this mess. Assuming I'd have no choice but to agree. "You used my name?" I asked, my voice cracking. My father nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We had to. Emily doesn't qualify, and you're in a much better position. It's no big deal. Just sign it and she'll get the money she needs. You won't even feel it." The room tilted. My pulse thundered in my ears. They had gambled with my name, my reputation, my future, like it was theirs to control. "I can't believe this," I whispered. My mother's tone hardened, her politeness slipping. "Ryan, stop being dramatic. We wouldn't even be here if it weren't urgent. Emily is going to lose her house. Do you really want your sister living on the streets? Is that the kind of man you've become?" I looked at her, stunned. "Do you even hear yourself? You're trying to guilt me into signing away my life because Emily messed up hers. You didn't care when I was sleeping in my car once. You didn't care when I had nothing. But now, suddenly, because Emily's in trouble, you're desperate. She's your sister," my father snapped, his voice rising for the first time that night. "She deserves better. She's always been the one who carried this family's name with pride. You were reckless, always chasing those little ideas and dreams. If we had to choose who to support, of course it was her. And now that you're in a position to help, you act like a stranger." His words cut deeper than I expected. Even after all these years, hearing him say so clearly that I had always been the disposable one twisted something inside me. All those times I'd questioned myself, wondering if I was imagining it or if I just wasn't trying hard enough to earn their approval, vanished in an instant. They'd never seen me as someone worth believing in. I pushed the papers back across the table, my hands trembling. No, I'm not signing this. My mother's face tightened. She leaned forward, her voice low but filled with venom. You think you're better than us now, don't you? Sitting in this nice house, pretending you built it all on your own. Don't forget where you came from, Ryan. Without us, you'd be nothing. The irony almost made me laugh. Without them, I had been nothing. And it was that nothingness that taught me to fight for everything I had now. The realization that after 15 years, nothing about them had changed was almost too much to take in. Then, twisting the knife further, my mother added, "If you won't do it for Emily, think of us. Our names are already tied to this loan. If you refuse, it'll look bad for the family. Do you want us to suffer after everything we've done for you?" Everything they'd done for me. The words echoed bitterly in my head. They weren't just asking for help anymore. They were using shame, reputation, and a false sense of family as leverage. And in that moment, something in me shifted. I realized there would be no going back, no reconciliation, no quiet forgiveness. They had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. I leaned back in my chair, my voice steady and calm. "So that's it. You come into my home, use my name without asking, demand I take on debt for Emily, and expect me to give in like before?" My father's jaw tightened. My mother's eyes narrowed. The silence grew heavier, thick like a storm about to break. That's when I knew this wasn't just about Emily. This was about showing them I wasn't the same broken kid they'd left behind 15 years ago. The silence that followed my refusal was suffocating. My father's hand clenched into a fist on the armrest, his knuckles turning white. My mother crossed her arms, lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, I thought they might yell, storm out, or threaten something worse. But instead, my mother exhaled a long, tired sigh and said, "You'll regret this, Ryan. Family is everything. And when you turn your back on family, you turn your back on yourself." The words lingered long after they left. They gathered their things, stood stiffly, and walked out without another word. I didn't follow. I didn't even look through the window. I sat there for a long time, long after the sound of their car had faded, staring at the unsigned loan papers on the table. For the first time in years, I felt like I was back in that car again, 18, alone, staring at the roof of my sedan, while the cold crept into my bones. I thought I had buried that version of myself under success and independence. But with just a few words and a stack of papers, my parents had managed to drag me back into that same wound. The days that followed were heavy. I couldn't focus at work. My mind kept replaying what had happened. I kept asking myself questions I couldn't answer. Was I cruel for refusing? Was I selfish for not helping Emily? Was I really as cold as they said? Their voices echoed in my head like a cruel chorus. "You're selfish. You'll regret this. Without us, you'd be nothing." I tried to shake it off, but the weight clung to me. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling that same isolation I thought I'd left behind. For years, I had told myself their rejection didn't matter, that I was stronger without them. But their sudden reappearance, their manipulation, and that betrayal over the loan cracked my defenses faster than I expected. One morning, I found myself parked outside the old gas station where I'd worked years ago. I hadn't been there in a decade. It looked almost the same, the faded sign, the smell of fuel in the air. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel, remembering those long nights mopping floors and wondering if I'd ever make it out. It hit me how close I'd come to giving up back then, how fragile I really was beneath all that supposed resilience. Their betrayal hadn't just hurt, it had reopened scars I wasn't sure had ever healed. But under that pain, something else stirred, a quiet reminder that I had survived once before, and I could survive again. I didn't have to let them define me anymore. I didn't have to play their game. That night, I pulled the loan papers from the coffee table and read them line by line. The more I read, the angrier I became. They had gone this far, used my name, my credit, my reputation, without even asking. It wasn't just manipulation, it was nearly fraud. They weren't simply asking for help. They were ready to destroy me to save Emily. I leaned back, breathing slowly. The anger hadn't burned out. It had hardened into something sharper. For the first time since that knock on my door, I stopped thinking about what they'd done to me and started thinking about what I could do next. The thought unsettled me. It felt dangerous, like crossing a line I couldn't return from. But it also felt necessary. If they were willing to gamble with my life for Emily's sake, maybe it was time they finally understood what it felt like to be powerless. Still, I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed space, air, perspective. I needed to remind myself that I wasn't that scared 18-year-old anymore. So I folded the loan papers, slipped them into a drawer, and began to plan. The drawer became both a burden and a symbol. Every time I passed it, I felt the simmer of anger, but also clarity. I had survived their abandonment once. I had built a life from nothing, and now they had shown me that nothing about them had ever changed. If I was going to rise, it would have to be, it wasn't for their approval anymore. It was for me. After their visit, I threw myself into work. By then, I was running a contracting company, something I had started small, but had steadily grown over the years. We specialized in renovations and custom builds. Business had always been good, but now I felt more focused and determined than ever. Every new project, every satisfied client, every paycheck I signed for my crew became part of a much larger vision. I started to understand that success wasn't just measured in money. It was about control. Control over my own life, my future, and most importantly, over the story my parents once tried to write for me. Opportunities began appearing in ways they never had before. A developer I'd worked with introduced me to a group of investors seeking someone to manage a series of commercial renovation projects. That single contract doubled my company's annual revenue. Suddenly, I wasn't just a small business owner anymore. I was building something substantial, something that carried weight and influence. With the additional income, I made changes in my personal life too. I upgraded my home, not out of vanity, but because I wanted a space that truly represented what I had built. I replaced my old truck with a new one that didn't need prayers to start before every job. I even took my crew on a retreat to thank them. Watching their faces light up reminded me how good it felt to value people in ways my parents never valued me. Each milestone gave me more confidence, more strength, and more distance from the boy who once slept in his car. But the growth wasn't only financial, it was emotional too. I started opening up to people in ways I never had before. Friends began to feel like family, the kind that showed up not because they wanted something, but because they genuinely cared. I even began mentoring a few young men in the trade, kids who reminded me of myself at 18, dismissed, doubted, and left to figure things out on their own. I told them what I wish someone had told me back then, that resilience doesn't mean you deserve to be abandoned, and that success isn't about proving others wrong, but proving yourself right. Still, somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew my parents hadn't disappeared. They had left my house empty-handed, but people like them never went quietly. I knew they were waiting, watching, hoping I'd eventually give in, hoping I'd call to offer help for Emily. But with each new contract, every investor meeting, every deposit into the business account, I felt stronger and more in control. If they thought they could still manipulate me, they were mistaken. The difference between who I was and who I had become became clear one night at a networking dinner. A major investor introduced me as the man who built his business from the ground up. The applause, the nods of respect, the firm handshakes, it was a kind of validation I had never received from my parents. And that night, I understood something vital. I didn't need their approval. I never had. But I also realized something deeper. Power wasn't just about shielding myself from them anymore. It was about positioning myself so that when they eventually came back, and I knew they would, I'd be ready. Not as the boy begging for attention, not as the man quietly enduring betrayal, but as someone who could finally look them in the eye and show them what it costs to underestimate me. My success wasn't just about wealth, it was about leverage, and deep down, I could feel the time to use it was drawing near. Point. It began with a phone call I was never meant to overhear. One afternoon, I stopped by a local supply yard to check on an order. As I walked past the small office, I caught the tail end of a heated conversation and recognized my mother's voice instantly. I froze. She was standing outside, phone pressed to her ear, using that sharp, commanding tone she always used when she wanted to sound in control. "No, I told you we'll get the money. My son has more than enough. It's just a matter of convincing him. Emily can't lose that house. Do you understand? If you foreclose, it'll look bad for all of us." I ducked behind a stack of pallets, my heart pounding. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about helping Emily through a tough time. She was on the brink of losing everything, and my parents weren't worried about her well-being. They were worried about their image, the family name. After she left, I stepped into the office and casually asked the clerk who the woman had been. He shrugged and said, "Some lady arguing with the bank manager. Her daughter's mortgage is underwater. Not sure why she thought yelling would change that." Everything started clicking into place. My parents hadn't just wanted me to help, they needed me to. Without my involvement, Emily was about to lose her home, and with it, the reputation they had spent decades building around her. The perfect image they had crafted was starting to collapse. And in their desperation, they had turned to the very person they once discarded. That realization was a turning point. For years, I had carried the burden of being the expendable one. But now, the roles had reversed. I wasn't the desperate one anymore. They were. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. They didn't just want my help. They depended on it. Around that same time, an opportunity came my way. The developer I'd been working with offered me the chance to invest in a series of properties he was acquiring. It was risky, but the potential reward was massive. I analyzed the numbers, reviewed the projections, and realized this was the moment I'd been waiting for. If I played it right, not only could I expand my business, but I could also gain real influence in the community. So, I poured everything into it. Late nights reviewing contracts, meetings with lawyers, tough negotiations with lenders. When the deal finally closed, I held the keys to properties that would generate steady income for years. I was no longer just running a construction company. I was becoming a landlord, an investor, a name that carried real weight in circles my parents could never enter. That's when my mindset shifted. If Emily truly was about to lose her house, and my parents were scrambling to protect their image, there was an opportunity here, but I wasn't going to rush it. Revenge done in anger is sloppy. Revenge done with patience is precise. So I waited. I built my reputation quietly, letting word of my success spread. I attended community meetings, shook hands with city officials, and even sponsored a local charity event. People started seeing me differently, not just as a contractor, but as someone who mattered. Then one evening, while reviewing paperwork, I noticed something almost poetic. One of the properties I'd partially invested in was just a few blocks from Emily's house. It wasn't much, an older building that needed renovation, but the proximity felt symbolic. Our lives, once divided by my parents' choices, were now circling back together. The more I looked into it, the clearer everything became. Emily's mortgage wasn't just unstable, it was collapsing. My parents' pleas weren't emotional, they were rooted in fear. And for the first time, I held every advantage, resources, influence, and the truth.